Since this seems to be a regular occurring series, my name is Sophia. And I'm really sorry. I just didn't like the game. Okay? I don't really know how to explain myself except, in this form. But you read the title. I didn't like Hollow Knight, and I'm gonna tell you why I preferred a very similar Metroidvania, Blasphemous. And let's start off with some disclaimers. I am very biased. Blasphemous seems to be catered perfectly towards me. Oh, also really quick, I've been wearing those yellow sunglasses all day, and the world has looked very yellow. It's like when they put that fake filter and they're like, oh my god, this is Mexico. It's like that, but blue. Or wait, no, that's what I've been seeing all day anyway, so I thought I'd just put on the blues. Can you... Okay, that works. Perfect. Cool. So, yeah, you saw the title. I didn't like Hollow Knight, and I'm biased because I loved Blasphemous, which is catered perfectly to my interests, to my ethnicity, and how I grew up, and, religiosity, and all that good stuff, right? And Hollow Knight, I was underwhelmed by, and I was just not gonna like it for reasons that I will explain in one sec. Another disclaimer, my ex's second favorite game was Hollow Knight. So there's a reason why I don't like it now. However, I can separate that because I played it while I was dating him and thought that things were like good. It's not normal to argue with your partner every single day to the point where you're really stressed out, by the way. Just a note. So let's start it off. If you haven't heard of what Hollow Knight is, then I don't know why you clicked on this video, but sure, I can give you a little rundown. And if you don't know what Blasphemous is, I'm really glad that you clicked on this video so you can find out. They're both Metroidvanias, and I would describe Metroidvanias as the point is to kind of explore through combat or through some way, and you expand to different areas within this expansive map, and you do that every time to unlock a new area you fight a boss. Kind of. It's very flexible. It is a mix of two different games, Metroid Prime and Castlevania, and they made the genre. I really think that video games should fix how they name stuff, because what do you mean a Souls-like? People don't understand what that is hearing it, right? Anyway, and they're actually very, very similar mechanically. They are wildly different in terms of art style and tone, and just everything, but they work kind of similarly in some respects. The combat has one weapon. You cannot replace it. You can upgrade it. I learned that the hard way in Hollow Knight. And you can access certain abilities by gaining these sort of charms, in the case of Hollow Knight, and rosary beads in the name of Blasphemous. Can you pick up a vibe on Blasphemous, by the way, just by rosary beads and Blasphemous? I hope you have. But that is the lowdown. And Hollow Knight is known as one of the best Metroidvania of all time, and Blasphemous is more lauded for its kind of horror approach and also just its mechanics. I really genuinely don't think enough people pay attention to the story, but that is something I talked about in the last video. Yeah, by the way, I'm making this video because in the last one that I was yapping about, and exactly one person was like, okay, I'm gonna need you to do this every night, and I was like, absolutely, yes queen, thank you for that motivation. And I was like, yeah, I didn't like Hollow Knight, so that's why I'm making this, by the way. So, that is the lowdown on both games. They rely on platforming and combat. In terms of visuals and story, as you can see, I don't edit these videos that I've been making, so I'm going to describe them for you. Blasphemous has a pixel art style, and it relies a lot on religious iconography from Spain. Wow, everything is yellow, and this one is the one bang that I cut that came out a little weird. Ugh, oh my god. You look like the 4th of July. Made me want a hot dog real bad. But Blasphemous is created by a Spanish game studio, The Game Kitchen, and they, in Spain, Catholicism, and in general in a lot of Hispanic countries, it's very intertwined in the culture. So it was inspired by a lot of the Spanish Inquisition, and by, again, Catholic Spanish iconography. And as someone who is half Colombian, I can also affirm that yes, it's not just like, oh, we're gonna make it a religious thing, which I will go into detail later. It's also a cultural thing. It's impossible to go to Spain and see great architecture and not have it be tied to Catholicism in some way normally. And it has a very grim undertone. It focuses on a how would I say this? A very pessimistic and like horror gothic version of the values of Catholicism. The whole story is about guilt. Your sword is called mea culpa, which means my fault. Also, it's the name of like a shitty Spain version of After. I saw the second one, and I have this little voicemail from my cousin's ex-boyfriend's younger brother of him saying, I was like, why do you like this movie so much? I didn't say his name. You didn't even hear it. You don't even know what it was. You don't even know him. And I was like, why do you like this movie so much? This little 13-year-old boy looks me in the eyes. He's like, y carro. I haven't for drug only one time, almost drug. No drug for in carro. Where I going to sign for that? I need the paper to sign that. I love you, Beanie. So love him. Anyway, back on track. Yes. Blasphemous also has a very large world. It is very complex. There's a lot of world building, there's a lot of hints. It's been compared to Bloodborne in the themes of like, you know, darkness, of these powers outside of your control. And I can't think of another game that I could compare it to in terms of sheer vibes. However, mechanically, again, it's so similar to Hollow Knight. And a lot of the language and visuals is connected to, again, Spanish iconography. By that I mean, oh, there's Miss Girl and she's like naked. She has a bush, by the way. That's important. I feel like a lot of the time they're just like, oh, female character, no bush. 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 And she has a giant, obviously she's pixelated and very small on the screen, so like you don't see anything, but like still. And she's carrying a giant like feathered statue. It's like a statue, but like it's got wings on it, and she's like holding it, and she's like, oh, bomb, right? One of them is one of the bosses is Melquiades, and he was inspired from the design of the martyrs during the time when Christians and Catholics were being persecuted and killed. They got martyrs. Don't always identify them, but yeah, they died for us and our sins, I guess, yeah. And would bejewel them, dress them up in very elegant clothing, gold, we're talking, and inlaid gems and shit. And so his design is this giant skeleton in this get up and being held up by hands. Also a callback to the processions in Spain during Holy Week, and in a lot of places in Latin America and Spain too. Can't forget them. But yeah, so those are the vibes of Blasphemous. If you have Catholic guilt, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, this is gonna scratch that itch. Okay, it's known for having very punishing combat. It is a Souls-like. It's been compared to Dark Souls a lot, actually. And yeah, the soundtrack banging, the characters and everything, it's super interesting. But it doesn't have as big as a fan base because it was created by a Spanish game studio. Americans like having stuff that is based on like English fantasy versions of stuff, if that makes sense. So you're picking up what I'm putting down. And so when it's a little bit different, I feel like there's like a kind of a different vibe. And also because it is so connected to Catholicism visually and in terms of themes. Obviously, I'm going to go in detail about that. It is not like a mockery of it, in my opinion, but we'll get to that, right? Yeah, it's just fantastic. And Hollow Knight is very, very different visually. It is hand-drawn kind of style. It's got kind of, I would almost describe it as kind of like a storybook kind of vibe. And all the characters are insects. And, oh yeah, the Hollow Knight is the main character, and the Penitent one is the main character of Blasphemous. I just love. There's some drawings with them together, and it's so cute. But they're all little bugs, and, oh, I didn't describe the plot of both. That's not as important, I'll get to that. But, yes. And so I can't really explain much more because I didn't get so far in the game. I say I got 30 to 40% through. and then I stopped because of reasons I will explain. But yeah, Hollow Knight is also Metroidvania. It does have pretty difficult combat, and it has more of a fantastical approach. Blasphemous does have more gore, and it doesn't have really any sexual elements, but there's definitely a lot more blood and bloodiness. And in Hollow Knight, not so much because they're bugs and they're, skittering around. And then you're trying to get into the hollow nest and there aren't any bugs there anymore. And it's like, whoa, you shouldn't be down there. What are you doing there, pal? But you're gonna do it. And I know that you're like the son of like this kingdom and stuff. It is also a Souls-like, it is also a Metroidvania, same as Blasphemous. The similarities they share also come in the form of their death system. In Blasphemous, when you die, you drop a guilt fragment, which takes out the amount of like superpower fervor that you can use to use your superpower spell prayers. And eventually, if you just leave them lying around Custodia, which is the world, that will eat up your fervor bar, and then it will eat up your health bar, so you're handicapped until you can pick that up and go through all the enemies that you just went through. And there's a very similar mechanic in Hollow Knight, except you don't just pick up the fragment, you have to fight the like remnant of yourself, and you can't use any of the powers. You can't use much of the powers that you normally would, same as in Blasphemous. I won't remember as many of the terms for Hollow Knight. I do apologize. I do want to give it its flowers because I think that it was a fantastic game. I just didn't like it. And we'll get into that now because I don't know if it's my fault. Disclaimer, I have ADD. I have a horrible sense of direction when it comes to video games, and I sometimes don't have as much common sense. Admittedly, I didn't like Stardew Valley. I know that that is another hot take, and that is because you have to look literally everything up, and it is not told, it is not explained to you. You have to just kind of like figure it out, and I don't have the common sense for that. That's my beat. I'm aware of that, but like that means that I'm just going to experience games differently, the same as like somebody who is deaf will not be able to experience the soundtrack of games. Like I need to choose games that can make allowances for me, right? And Hollow Knight does not do that that much. See, the thing with Hollow Knight is to even get a map of the general area, you have to find the map maker, right? You do not have a you can equip the locator icon. I really needed to make use of that. Actually, when I handed it to my ex to beat this mini boss, he was like, "Why do you have this equipped?" And I was like, "I don't think you understand. I'm gonna get lost." Okay. And then you have to find the map maker. Don't get lost on the way. Because also there's barely any checkpoints. And then they're like, "Oh, by the way, you will have to..." So you're trying to find a map maker to fill in your map, and then as time goes on, you fill in the map, but you have to get to a checkpoint to, fill in the progress that you've made, right? Well, those checkpoints are very, 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 very far and few between. And the way that it's set up is not very logical. Like, because it's underground, right? Because it is this big nest, there isn't a way to determine, like, oh, logically, this is a very vertical area, so I'll just keep going up and I'll eventually find a checkpoint. Like there is an area in Blasphemous. It's just completely vertical, and you're just kind of like, I just got to get to the top, right? And there's a sense of location to Blasphemous, at the top of that mountain area is a convent, right? And then you're like, okay, well, it's a whole convent thing. There's aisles, there's different floors and stuff like that. The sewers do get me messed up in the same way that that Hollow Knight does. But in Hollow Knight, you don't get that because it's underground and it doesn't always follow physics. You know what I mean? So you're being stuck with. You're also learning the controls. You're learning how to move around and dash and stuff, right? So movement is very difficult, and if you want to get from one area to another, you have to gotta pass all the enemies, right? And that can be very tedious to figure out where you are. You could take a wrong turn. Again, I probably had a very different experience because of my bad sense of direction. On top of that, You know, there's this like guy, he's like a big beetle or whatever. I don't remember. I don't care enough to remember. Apologies. But he is kind of like the fast travel from one area to the other. But he's located on the very far end of one area. So maybe just be faster to go the other way. And so you're, again, it's just so much work to get from point A to point B, and there's not as much, like, it's not that there's much payoff because you're traveling for the point of traveling, right? But it's just so difficult and it takes so long, and it's like it's so tedious at one point. And then they're like, oh, you can buy markers from the store at the very top, and it's like, I don't have the patience to be traveling so much to get from point A to point B and then all the way back up. Okay, that was very annoying to me, as was the fact that I would have to fight all these enemies just to get to a boss. And you can say skill issue. I don't care. I've beaten Blasphemous so many times, okay? I have beaten harder games than Hollow Knight. But this was built against me. The odds were not in my favor, okay? And quite frankly, I think it's ableist against me. But you have to fight from one checkpoint. I specifically remember this because I was just stuck here. This was when I gave up. I made it to the castle or whatever, and there's a bench, which is the checkpoint, which is really cute. I will give Hollow Knight its flowers at like the end. What did my boyfriend say? Huh, interesting. But anyway, then you have to go up and then you have to get to this mini boss, right? And it's like my health is already so far down because of all these enemies in the way that are difficult, because you, when you level up the sword, by the way, the nail, which is really cute, it gets harder and the enemies get harder, and it's like I'm not getting better at this game. Things are just getting harder. It's like how it was learning 3D modeling. I didn't get better at 3D modeling. I just found corners, I guess. I don't know. I had a really good metaphor for it. I didn't get better. I just struggled more, I guess. I don't know. Anyway. But it was just very irritating, and it was like, I'm doing all of this and it just doesn't feel worth it. I'm not getting better as a result of this grind. So there was that. Again, there was the whole thing of buy a location marker and then you can just put it wherever, which you can do already in Blasphemous automatically. It's like it is so much work, and I need those little bug shell things already for other stuff. I don't want to do that. Like, it felt too straining on resources. I also didn't like the way that the bug shells, the things that you get when you defeat an enemy, I'm going to call them bug shells, are just kind of scattered around, and they don't automatically come to you or anything like that, even visually. They just, and you have to go pick them up. And there's a lot of areas with, you know, varying platforms on different levels and moving enemies. And it's like, okay, well, now I have to fight another enemy to get the stuff from this enemy, and I'm not good at this game. So, again, could be a skill issue. Okay, I'm expressing my opinion on the internet. I'm allowed to do that. But yeah, that was my main beef with Hollow Knight. I also didn't like how little information there was. I'm someone that is a big lore person. I know that's not for everybody, obviously, but it annoyed me a lot when people said, "Oh, I heard, you know, oh my god, the world in Hollow Knight is so interesting. The lore of Hollow Knight is so interesting." And I was like, "It is?" Because I got 30 to 40% through the game to the biggest area, the area that should arguably have a lot of lore, you know, the main kingdom castle, and there's been like 3 pillars with lore, and that's it. What? You know, and I just didn't like that. I stopped playing the game and I didn't return to it because I had no desire. Another additional aspect is I'm not a big fantasy person unless it's very, very unique, if that makes sense. And Hollow Knight is very unique in visual ways, but I wasn't overly thrilled by it. So that's why I didn't like it. Again, I apologize. I know that a lot of people did. I just didn't. And I do want to give Hollow Knight its flowers really quick. I think that is a beautifully designed game. I think that to have such a challenging game and such a successful game have a more hand drawn aesthetic is great. I think that's awesome. I love to see more hand drawn stuff. I love the environments and the idea of being a bug warrior. I think that's so cool. And I especially liked the areas with like the mushrooms and stuff. I actually didn't like that in the beginning because I was like, what do you mean I'm supposed to hit it with the nail down? How is this common sense? I don't know. That's me, right? And but I like that every single area had its own vibe. I liked the idea of this just giant network of tunnels that just can't be accessed anymore. Um, and by then there's like a decaying society outside that's just like, yeah, shit went down. And I'm like, what shit went down? I want to know what went down. It's not like I'm not the type of person that's just going to churn through and just be like, I don't care about all that. I make a conscious effort to find lore. I'm a bit of a completionist, which is really difficult when you don't have common sense and you don't know how to do the completion without a guide, but it's fine. It's fine. I don't even care, right? But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think that the environments and the music as well, and the characters were cute. The designs were very, very memorable. The idea is very memorable. Um, I believe that it's a good game. I just also know that it wasn't made for me and my taste. And I want people to tell me what they liked so much about it. Because I feel like hearing what people love will help me get over that, or at least understand their point of view. So please tell me. Now, that all that being said, I have said repeatedly, Blasphemous and Hollow Knight are very similar mechanically, right? But the payoff of Blasphemous was so much more rewarding. And I'm going to explain something about me, my lore, really quick, just to explain what drew me to it initially. I grew up Catholic, and again, I'm half Hispanic, I'm half Colombian. The game was made by Spanish developers who were very inspired by their own culture. And I always try to make an effort to see Hispanic representation in games, not just in the games themselves in like a really badly written line like, in my culture, we do not fraternize with the colonizers, or some shit like that, right? I sounded hesitant because I feel like this is something that's not talked about and something people don't want to talk about in the games industry as much. But like when Saviorless came out, which is the first game developed by a Cuban game studio, I was so hyped. I was like, I'm really interested to see. Because I've realized over time, when it comes to big genre stories, I am attracted to stuff that is outside of the ordinary. I was interested in this one fantasy book, Akasa Warrior, which is basically like a Nigerian wizard school. And I was so fascinated by it because I was like, okay, I don't care about the big old fantasy stuff. Okay, I don't care about Lord of the Rings. I don't care about Harry Potter. It's wizards and ogres and potions and D&D classes and stuff, and I'm tired of that. It is boring to me at this point. It is visually the same, thematically the same. I'm just not getting what I want out of the genre. And I read that book and I read it a while ago, and I've only come to love it even more, even though it's a 200-page like YA book, right? Because it comes from a different culture that I'm unfamiliar with, but it breaks that mold. And I felt that same way about Blasphemous, and especially that it also worked in Catholicism. Because also I grew up Catholic and I grew away from it pretty quickly in a lot of different ways throughout my life. But it still touched me. It still affects me. There's a feeling that I can't describe when I enter a church. It's like an imaginary friend, like Jesus is an imaginary friend. He's just kind of like, I know you don't exist. You're just kind of here, you know. And I do naturally gravitate towards elements of Catholicism in my own writings and in my own stories and the themes and stuff, right? And a huge thematic aspect of Catholicism and that is utilized in Blasphemous is guilt. And I feel as if it was communicated in a way that can only be done by someone that grew up Catholic. And I say that because if you are someone that's just kind of like shitting on Catholicism, Christianity, it's the equivalent of just like showing a nun pulling her skirt up and like, oh, she has lace panties and a thong and I don't know, fishnets or something. It's disrespectful and it's there for shock value. Whereas in Blasphemous, it's worked into the story where no matter what, it is your fault. No one else can atone for your actions. And you must also atone for the actions of others. And you see people all around you in the world. Like, literally, one dude has his feet nailed to a board. I was about to pull my feet up, and then I was like, no, not for free. These people are punishing themselves for stuff that they think is their fault, and you don't even know what they're punishing themselves for. And you see that in Catholicism growing up to a much lesser extent. Nobody nailed their feet to boards. But I did feel that a lot growing up. You know, it's always your fault. You are the only one that can fix this. And if you don't, then it's even worse, you know. And who knows what that thing is, you know, because it depends on the values of others. So I think that that was done in a respectful way. Obviously, you can tell when there are callbacks. There's the symbol of the twisted one. It's obviously like a callback to Jesus on the cross, right? A crucifix. But again, Catholicism is so intertwined with Spanish culture that it's like I don't know. It's the same thing as like on, you know, the which coin has it is in God we trust, right? How can you talk about the US without talking about Christianity, about baptism in the South, you know? And there's a tendency by the dominant religious group to say anything that is not specifically endorsing our religion is attacking it. And I don't think that's the case with Blasphemous. It takes those aspects and it expresses them in a way that uses them to their best advantage, you know? Yes, there's so many horror movies that use the possession thing and like, oh, demons and stuff. And it's sometimes it feels really disrespectful even as somebody that's not Catholic anymore and thinks that it's all pretty much bullshit. And then there's something like Midnight Mass, which is about this priest that goes to the Holy Land and then he finds something that is literally a vampire with wings and he's like, oh my god, it's an angel, brings it back and he's like, we're gonna live forever. So I'm going to technically kill all of you with this angel here and then we're, you know, gonna be blessed, you know. And if you watch it, it makes so much sense. There's so many messages about the afterlife and how religion can affect you, how it can make someone a better person, how it makes somebody a worse person. And that sort of in-depth analyzation is just really valuable. And I don't think that it should be rejected because it's not specifically endorsing the faith of the person that used to believe in it. I don't know. That's my hot take. Anyway, so let me talk about the game itself. I adore the character designs for Blasphemous. I love something that's creepy. I love something that's a little gross. And I love, again, Catholic imagery and themes present in it. So it was just like catnip to me, okay? Like literally, this dude has to go to the Cradle of Affliction, which is this like thing, and he's got to fight this giant head which shoots lasers out of its hands, who is called the Lady of the Charred Visage, which I thought was an easy boss, but everybody else seems to think is hard. And she was a girl who was so beautiful that she was like, people are worshiping me instead of the miracle, which is like the big god, right? But technically not, but we'll get to that. And I'm gonna scar my face with hot burning oil, right? Because that's a great idea. And the miracle's like, I love your energy. I love your passion. Let me turn that to gold and so that your face is permanently burning. Yeah. And then you fight her and then you have to stab the parts of her brain that are exposed through her skull. And her face is burning in golden oil. And it's just so good. Like, that's so good. And the area leading up to the convent of Our Lady of the Charred Visage, it's called Graveyard of the Peaks. And all the inanimate objects that you can break, because they have a bunch of those throughout Blasphemous, are these frozen corpses of people going like, and they are women that were making a pilgrimage to the convent of Our Lady of the Charred Visage and then froze to death in the cold because, yeah, it also has the best music. My favorite music in the first Blasphemous game is in Graveyard of the Peaks. But yeah, so we can see, right? We can see it's called a convent. You know, there's this extreme passion for religion, right? I love that. And the boss designs, the character designs, everything is just so meticulously thought out. And there were a lot of callbacks, or sorry, the developers specifically said we referenced a lot of Francisco de Goya's paintings, who was a Spanish painter known for his more troubling subject matters. And you see that. You see it in every aspect. Every area has this grimness about it. Every area in Custodia. There is the wasteland of churches, which is this area that's like both above and below ground that is just a bunch of churches that were built when there was a lot of religious fervor, and then they all just fell to ruin because of the plague of monsters, right? There are just, there's just, the designs for everything are incredible, okay? Looking at them, I'm like, wow, I'm in church again and everything's haunted. This is the best version of my life. And yeah, there's not as much in the second game. The second game is more fantastical, but we're not talking about that. And in terms of location, because I do need to touch on that because I specifically mentioned that in Hollow Knight. Again, the layout of Custodia, the land that it takes place in, is very self-explanatory. Again, there are mountains. Mountains go up. There's something at the top of the mountains. Let me make it through. These are sewers. They're going to connect me to a bunch of different places. Oh, this is a giant underground bell. There's probably something at the bottom of the bell, so I should go to the bottom, right? And you can also place location markers everywhere in Blasphemous, and you can do that immediately. It's just part of the map function. There are fast travel points, but those are more few and far between. Later on, if you donate enough money to this church, they allow you to teleport between checkpoints, which is really handy. And it felt like a good balance, because at one point you're like, oh my god, I really have to walk all the way there and I have to fight these things. And then at that point you're like, okay, I'm just gonna teleport. I'm not gonna get anything out of this. I found all the items, right? And I'm really good at platforming, specifically. Hollow Knight didn't have as much of that. I felt that there were areas that I couldn't access yet because I didn't have certain skills. And Blasphemous incorporated the platforming into the combat. Again, there's one area that's completely vertical, and if you fall, well, sucks for you. And that was awesome. That was perfect for me. I could travel around really easily, and if there was an area I couldn't access, I would just mark it on my map and move right along. And the progression was good enough that I was like, okay, there's a fast travel point. It's not somewhere that's a hassle to get to, that isn't, like, there's not an easier way to get to it. I'm just gonna do it. And when it comes to that thing I was mentioning before of like, oh, this constant crush of like, oh, I have to get through all these enemies to get to the boss, to do the thing, right? It was really annoying in Hollow Knight. But in Blasphemous, it feels right. It feels rewarding. Like, I went the wrong way in the beginning. I shouldn't have gone to the Graveyard of the Peaks. That has wind blowing you every which way, and if you fall, you're dead, right? I went there first. I shouldn't have, but I just kept going and going and going because I was like, there is something there, right? I think the problem is that in Hollow Knight, every area is just kind of there, and you don't know where the end goal is. You could assume, oh, well, it's just the farthest area that I entered in, but like, I don't know. I felt like I was getting more hints as to what to do in Blasphemous, which is crazy for my biggest complaint of the game. But yeah, I felt that I knew where I was going, I knew what I was doing, and maybe I have an advantage because I did grow up Catholic, so I'm like, ah, yes, I see that you are the monks and therefore are good. You know, I see what you are doing here. I understand. But I don't think so. Not really. And, yes. I don't know. I think that that was all I was gonna say. Oh, the story, right? You get thrown in. There's so much story. I felt like Hollow Knight didn't have enough story. Again, 30 to 40% through the game, and Blasphemous has so much story. I still don't understand this game fully. Okay, there's so much. There are collectible bones scattered throughout the game. You get a little blurb of just some random person in Custodia's story. Every single item in the game has lore attached to it. So even if it's not relevant to the main plot, you get to learn stuff about the world, about Custodia. Oh, by the way, there's just this girl that like cried over the trees and she was the only one that can make them grow. Oh, just by the way, this guy built a huge underground bell, which by the way, it's called hondo, which is kind of almost a pun on words because in Spanish, fondo means deep and it's a bell deep underground. But anyway, yeah, it was just an overflowing of stuff that was also so well designed and so interesting. You know, it wasn't just, oh, well, that's a bell. It's like, oh, this bell tinkles mysteriously, and it tells you about the creation of the bell. The relic is a severed hand. This is whose hand it was, and this is how he died. So on and so forth. I just didn't get that in Hollow Knight. It felt so disconnected from stuff, and I know that that's the intention, like, oh, this is a dying place, right? But just can I get a little bit more information? Like, I'm just not getting enough. Maybe there are context clues that I was not appreciating. But, yeah. I should also say, my biggest complaint about Blasphemous is that a lot of the side quests and a lot of the, bonus stuff, it's not very, it doesn't make sense. You have to look up basically how to do certain side quests, how to do da da da, right? It's not as self explanatory. However, the quality of it and the appeal of it to me was so much that I was like, I'll let it slide. And I didn't feel that in Hollow Knight. I felt that Hollow Knight just kind of didn't do it for me, or it had more payoff that I was just not expecting, or I was just so distracted by the fact that I had no idea where the fuck I was going that it screwed me over. I wouldn't be surprised. And yeah, I'm sorry. I just didn't like it. And I appreciate Hollow Knight as a video game. I love Blasphemous as a video game, and one was better than the other. I would love to hear why people didn't like Hollow Knight. Personally, it's one of the best games or something. I don't get it. I want to get it, okay? And I hope that you have gotten why I like Blasphemous and you're willing to check it out. It is very challenging, and it has incredible art style. Let me clear something up real quick before I get off here and go to sleep or something. I don't know. Who knows what the night will bring? Or the last half hour of night and then morning. Well, the thing is, again, I explained the thing about religious things and them not being necessarily mocking. Again, I believe there's a line. I think that Blasphemous uses its roots in a story that, in a way that pushes the story forward, in the same way that Hollow Knight's art style kind of gives it a sense of whimsicalness, a feeling of almost like forgotten history, because, we're not reading storybooks anymore. I felt that the addition of symbols, motifs, stories, just the use of pain in Blasphemous really accentuated the story. I did not feel like it mocked Catholicism. I think that it took the parts of it that could be inherently scary or disturbing, like, yes, everything is your fault, by the way, and you have to make up for them, and you are cursed, and there's nothing you can do about that. And you're going to see people go far, very far, like literally just whip themselves on the back, and you're just going to have to accept that you will never be as good as them. And you should be. You should be on that level. Obviously, I'm not talking real life, but on some level, you have to not take credit for your actions. You have to act like this was all thanks to God. Okay? Yeah. That is my points. Hope you enjoyed watching this and me crashing out 2 days ago. So, yeah. Bye!